Disney's a company that's crafted so many different iconic villains. Behind their slew of rather generic protagonists was often lurking a compelling and interesting villain, and I think this was the case from the very beginning, with the very one-note Snow White playing second fiddle in terms of character and prominence, to the more frightening and enigmatic Evil Queen. And it continues onwards through every era. The villain is often a massive draw, perhaps even more so than the hero. And they get filled with so much character, like Cruella de Vil. And even when the protagonist started getting more character and more development, like in the Renaissance era, the villains still remained super iconic and well crafted. Scar, Gaston, Jafar, so many classics. I mean, yeah, there's some forgettable ones. Shan Yu from Mulan, dude's a bit of an afterthought the whole film. But I think that is the minority, and that Disney really has perfected the art of crafting villains. And we see that continue to the modern era, even if perhaps they have started to lean on the surprise twist villain trope a little too much for my taste in the last decade. But even then, the characters are well constructed, they have depth, and they're really interesting. We're talking here about characters like Hans or Deputy Mayor Bellwether, who cultivate this facade personality and then drop it once they've gotten what they want. And thus, you as the audience member also feel that sense of betrayal alongside the characters in the film. But yeah, I think it is a little bit overdone, and so I'm glad they've started to dial back on that since, because you don't want to oversaturate things. Because there was a long stretch where they'd use it again and again. Frozen, Big Hero 6, Zootopia, even Moana from a certain point of view with the true identity of the lava guy. But yes, today I want to focus on one villain in particular. One character of note that I think is among the best villains that Disney's ever put to screen. And that character is, of course, if you've clicked the video, you know what I'm talking about, Mother Gothel. And she's the villain from Tangled, which is the Disney version of the classic fairy tale Rapunzel. Okay, so I guess we'll give you a brief synopsis, just to give you a bit of a refresher on who this character is. So, Mother Gothel is introduced in the prologue, I guess, of the film, where she had long ago discovered the magical powers of this golden flower. A flower that when you sing the right words is going to heal your wounds and restore your youth and beauty, which, as an ugly old hag, Mother Gothel loves. From what I understand, she repeats this process over the centuries, she gets old, she comes back to the flower that she guards from everybody else, and she uses its magic to restore herself. And slowly but surely a kingdom starts to form, ruled over by Rapunzel's parents. And the queen eventually gets sick, and the legend of the flower gives the king hope. So he sends out his lads, and they all eventually find the flower, they take it, and destroy it to make a tonic for the queen, which in turn saves her life, and gives little baby Rapunzel crazy hair powers. Of course, Gothel can't let this stand, so she snatches the baby away and takes her to be raised in seclusion in a tower, in a meadow, in the middle of nowhere. And there they stay until Rapunzel's almost a full-grown adult, an adult who wants to go out into the world and make their mark, who wants to explore and experience things, who wants to be her own person. And of course, Gothel can't have that. She needs to hold on to the proverbial golden goose. She needs to ensure that she's not going to grow old and crumble to dust anytime soon. And so they have some conflict, and Rapunzel does end up sneaking out into the world anyway, accompanied by the noted ruffian, Flynn Rider. She then learns how awesome life is, she falls in love with Flynn, gets tricked by Mother Gothel into going back home, before finally piecing together that she's the missing princess of the Kingdom of Corona, which results in Mother Gothel becoming very old very quickly, which results in Mother Gothel fighting her, stabbing Eugene, the hair getting cut, and then falling out the window and turning to dust very quickly. Pretty gnarly death, all things considered. And so, yeah, I just think she's one of Disney's best villains of all time. She fulfills her role in the film to utter perfection, and there are a number of reasons for this, but many of them boil down to this one overwhelming fact. She feels real, like she could actually exist. A character that sort of connects with you so easily. Because in the end, she isn't some evil witch. She isn't some jealous queen or a deranged psycho. Well, maybe a little. She has story beats that feel real, that you can connect to and understand, that feels more human and less fairy tale. Like when you boil down her plot, her arc, this is what you get. A woman who's obsessed with staying young and beautiful forever. When she loses access to that, it's not her impending death that frightens her. She clearly greatly suffers at the idea of losing her beauty, of growing old and losing that glow. And so you combine that with one of the best depictions of a narcissistic, controlling parent that keeps kid under their thumb in any animated or kids film that I've ever seen, where you have her not really be overly aggressive, but sort of sweet and kind to a point, where she manipulates the way that Rapunzel thinks and how she feels, using that kindness, but also through guilt. shaming her for disagreeing with her, and shaming her for hurting her mother's feelings and turning her back on her. On top of that, while she is kind, her kindness is very backhanded, sickly sweet. Like when she shames Rapunzel for not lifting her up to the window fast enough. And so I think that makes her feel more real in a way, as opposed to a caricature that's clearly awful. It makes it more easy to understand how she's kept Rapunzel under her thumb for so long, using a careful mix of affection, veiled insults to cut down her self-esteem, and doomsaying to try to make her fear the outside and depend solely on Gothel as a source of protection from danger. And even more importantly, this doomsaying holds an element of truth, because there are people out there looking for her. And so like a good villain, and a good liar in general, she's twisted things slightly. So she's telling part of the truth, but not the full story. And in my experience, that's how the best liars operate. So yeah, in that way, she feels very real. And because she feels real, like an actual abusive parent, to me she becomes more unsettling and enhances the drama overall. But that wouldn't be the only reason I find her character so compelling and unique compared to a lot of other different Disney villains. I also like that she's a softer character, a softer presence. She's not up all in your face with her dastardly schemes and her overt evilness. She's a manipulator and a cruel person. And we, as the audience, see and understand this, but to other people in the story, she wears a mask, so to speak, which makes a lot of sense, because if you're an evil villain who's trying to manipulate events, surely you would not want people to think that you're an obvious evil villain. Feels counterintuitive, but that's how it often goes in these films. But not here, and because she is a softer character, and more sneaky, and more roundabout, it makes it all the more not quite frightening, but unsettling when she goes mask off. Like when Rapunzel finally figures out who she is and confronts Gothel, and her whole persona shifts to suddenly being cold, cut off, angry, aggressive, violent, discarding the role that she'd played for years as Rapunzel's mother in the blink of an eye. It's kind of like what we saw with characters like Prince Hans and Deputy Mayor Bellwether, except with Gothel, it doesn't come across as a twist. It's something ominous that the story had been building to over time. And in that way, I think it was a little bit more impressive, because you're on the edge of your seat waiting for this to happen, waiting for that penny to drop. And then finally, I just like that as a villain, she's smart, like really smart, a competent villain. She discovers the power of the flower first out of anyone. She protects and cultivates it for hundreds of years without losing access. And when she does lose access, she instantly busts into what you'd assume is the most highly protected place in the world, or at least in the kingdom, and abducts the royal baby. And all of this as an old woman. She then manages to outrun the guards and keep her hidden for 16 years, convincing her it's for the best and to keep her safe. And considering it's likely that for many of these years the kingdom was out in force looking for her because they know the baby was abducted, then I think it's doubly impressive that she was able to successfully hide her all this time, whilst also regularly leaving to go and do whatever it is she does. And then when Rapunzel does finally go out into the world, Gothel pretty easily tracks her down. She quickly makes an alliance with the twins, who take out Eugene for her, thus allowing her to set up events to get her back into Rapunzel's head by making her think that Eugene betrayed her and abandoned her, whilst also knocking out the twins and double-crossing them at the same time, tying off any possible loose ends and condemning them and Eugene to death, preventing all three of them from ever blabbing about what they saw and potentially getting her in trouble from the king and queen. And this pretty much guarantees that she and Rapunzel are going to remain hidden forever. But then Eugene does come back, and what do you know? She ambushes him and kills him straight up. And she only dies because she couldn't predict that the dude would rather let himself die than let a girl that he's known for like 2 days suffer. And so in my eyes, because of this, she becomes one of the most competent villains of all time too, at least in a Disney context, because she does what she sets out to do, and her downfall comes upon her more through chance than anything else. And so yeah, Mother Gothel, a top tier villain from a top tier film, and I think Disney needs a lot more characters just like her. She's truly one of a kind. And so yeah, not really much else to say. So with all that being said, I would like to remind you, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of Mother Gothel? You on the bandwagon with me? Maybe not? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.